Good afternoon. I'm so glad that you've made your way to this room. We were worried that we would be speaking to an empty room, so that's really good to see you all here. I'm Priyanka Sethi, and I head sales and strategy for TCS in UK and Ireland, focused on education.
Good afternoon, everybody. I'm not going to use the mic, or I will take the podium shortly. I'm Roger today, the Chief Information and Transformation Officer at the University of Warwick. I think.
Do you want to go ahead and give a little bit about Warwick, and then I'll come in?
So, I'm not sure what's going on with the screen there. I'm sure there's a quiz at the end where you'll work out each of the words. So, just a bit of background on the University of Warwick, and I won't spend too long, because I'm suspecting many of you are familiar, if not all of you. But the key thing, I guess, is that we've been focusing a lot of our efforts on the build-up to our 60th. This year is our 60th anniversary, and one of the core foundations of the University of Warwick has and always been around innovation. And we've seen growth both in research and academia through innovative research and teaching and learning. We have 5 pillars to our 2030 strategy, and the reason I'm just sharing this is because it dovetails into the remainder of the presentation. We focus on social inclusion, is a huge focus area for now and of course for the future. We absolutely pivot a lot of the work that we do around innovation, whether that's innovation, as I said, in research, education, but also digital capabilities, and I'll touch on the journey that we've been on. Focusing around regional leadership, and of course our international collaboration and expanding our international collaborations, be that both in Europe with the Utopia Alliance, but of course pushing further into Asia-Pac in the future. And of course, like many universities across the country, high focus and dependency on sustainability. So nothing in there that will be a surprise, but it's definitely where we centre a lot of our focus areas at Warwick. So I'll very quickly hand over to Priyanka to talk about TCS.
Yeah, as I was walking through the USISA halls this morning, I just realized that we are actually one of the best kept secrets. We are part of the Tata Group, very well known, been in the UK ecosystem with known brands such as Jaguar Land Rover, Tetley Tea, Chorus Steel, to name a few. And keeping in with the celebrations and birthdays, we are celebrating 50 years as TCS in the UK and have been working across multiple sectors with some of the biggest names and delivering transformation, efficiencies, and growth and innovation across all these sectors. So we like to say it's from education or from cradle to pensions is where you'll see us working. And for the education sector, we've been focused all throughout, but one of the biggest gifts or what sets us apart as a group is that 66% of our group's profits are held in a charitable trust. Till date has been for the 150 years of Tata's existence. And out of that, 2/3 ever since has been dedicated to education. So that's where our commitment to education as a company is. But what we've been doing now is the technology transformation that we've been working across with universities, higher education organizations, in helping them scale, grow, if it's global partnerships, if it's taking direction into new markets, new services, to improve the services that you deliver to your students, to increase the enrollment rate, bring AI into the whole ecosystem to deliver better service, and most importantly, give a lean, efficient organization. And that's where we've been playing, and that's the basis on which we started our relationship with Warwick. But just beyond just this.
I'll get my steps in. Can you hear me regardless without the mic? Is that okay? That's great. Sorry. So it's worth, before we go into the specifics, it's worth noting that the University of Warwick and Tata an alliance and partnerships on our Warwick Manufacturing Group, which is a manufacturing centre of excellence. And we established that both with the late Lord Bhattacharya, who's a professor at Warwick, 20 years ago, with the late Ratan Tata as well. And it's quite important that we acknowledge that because part of the collaboration that we're doing with TCS is larger than what you're going to hear about. It's more broadly around how we can strengthen that relationship going further. So, as a bit of context, so I started with the University of Warwick 2.5 years ago. This is my first role in higher education. The organisations I've worked in prior were Rolls-Royce for International Airlines Group even, as Group I&O Director. Rolls-Royce, I was Chief Technology Officer for the group, Boots and Dixon Stores Group. So my first step into higher education, and particularly in Warwick, and in the digital function was interesting. Now, very typical British word to use. I say interesting in the context of it was quite difficult for me to assimilate the standards that I'd seen in the private sector, be that the reference models, whether that's some of the methodologies, TOGAF, ITIL, SAFE, COVID, I can go on, not necessarily being universally applied in the HE context. And then coupled with that was a cultural inertia that had crept in with countless transformations that had taken place in the digital function, but actually lack of investment, whether that's in people, in skills, or in branching out to technology partnerships. You know, I've come from 27 years in the technology sector where it's all been about the technology ecosystem you create, rather than building all in-house, how do you create a partnership model. Coupled with that, I found that we had high degrees of obsolescence, it's fair to say, technical debt. We had base level investments were being made around our infrastructure. I have one of my esteemed colleagues sat in front of me who I'm sure, Ryan, if you don't know, will talk to you about the pain points that he would face in terms of how we would manage the day-to-day running. And then actually against our planning cycle, did we have an ambitious digital strategy that we were going to look to? No, we didn't. So quite early on, we introduced a restructuring of our operating model for our function. And in that, we looked at building new capabilities or strengthening capabilities like cybersecurity and infosec, like creating a business engagement capability, an enterprise architecture capability, and so on and so forth. In addition to those two things, in addition to that, we introduced a digital strategy, a 5-year roadmap that has now been approved by the board and by the council members, which is going to transform not how only we do our enabling services, but also how we invest in education and research. But particularly, given the topic of the conversation, we did launch with an AI strategy. So there were lots of conversations happening, and I've been very vocal about the fact that actually we don't just need to focus on some of the low-hanging fruit around automation, but how do we look at AI more holistically? So this is our vision for AI. I'm not going to read the slides in detail, but I guess the key thing, we have 5 goals at a strategic level. So the first, of course, is we need to see how it can support in personalising our education offering. And actually, I believe there is a lot that AI can do to help us in curriculum development, curriculum management, assessment, etc. But also how we accelerate research. We've done a lot of work already around research, and I'm sure many of you in your universities are doing the same in AI. But how do we do that on scale in partnership with industry? Because industry has been doing it for quite a while. Again, I was at Rolls-Royce and we did a lot of work around digital twin and machine learning in 2015 and 16. So how do you take those partnerships and apply that in a university context? And again, we're working with several and including TCS as well. Key one that we are going to pivot on is administration. Because actually, if you look at the services that we provide, there's lots that we can do around the administration needs. And we didn't just look at IT. The transformation agenda that I have is all about professional services. To give you a couple of site examples, and I won't steal the thunder on what we've done with TCS, but our admissions, we went from proof of concept at the end of December to fully productionized AI admission query management, which is addressing 20% of queries using Copilot agent, and we've got a backlog of other work that we're going to be doing. Of course, we want to see innovation and ethics and exclusivity, but what we're doing is we're using the OECD, so the Organisation for Economic Cooperation and Development's principles of AI, that centres around human fairness, transparency, and accountability. And I'm rattling through this because we'll go to the core part, which is how did we approach the scope of work? Now, as I said earlier, it was quite key when we did the restructuring of my digital function that we looked at a make versus buy. What do we need to keep central into the digital function? And what do we buy in as a service? Are we going to be wanting our people to spend time doing help desk service? Or do we want to buy that in as a service and focus that leadership on more strategic ambitions? How do we leverage AI as a capability to support on simple query management, if I may, using knowledge-based articles that are developed? But also, how can we build in a more effective user experience? So the verticals that you see there are the ones that we focused on as part of the tender that we went out with. So service desk and end user service, I'm not going to read them all out. But the key one also, and they're all key, but the key one is the infosec area. It's an area that I felt has been underinvested in the sector, and one that we know is facing more and more threats as time progresses, and we recognise that we needed a partner that had that level of threat intel dealing with other verticals.
And actually, this is With collaboration with Raja and his team and Garant, we came up with this operating model together to utilize utilize the current investments on technology already existing, but building an automation layer right on top we brought through our product called Cognix, which is an AI-led tool that connects all the current under applications that can work through it. The second layer is the interaction layer. There was only phone at this point available to the university and its users. We brought in different web channels, self-help, web chat, and made it a more multi-user friendly interface for any touch points. And then the digital service desk became a 24/7 service desk, which is quite critical, actually, if you look at the way students and stakeholders in a university environment operate. It needs to be 24/7, and that's one of the big changes and highly improved the user experience from that point on. And the digital cockpit, which is the experience elevation center that allowed us to see in one place the number of interactions, what's going wrong, each device, how is it tracked, and all of those in one nutshell. And as Raja mentioned, the Security Operations Center, the SOC, very creatively, actually, we always get this question, do you do it in-house, do you do it? But we were able to do it near shore at our Letterkenny Center, which is a shared service SOC model that allows us to keep investing in it, bring the best of the security expertise that we can, and monitor at scale. So that's where we've put this Security Operations Center in Letterkenny. And in addition to all this, being who we are and the scale that we bring in, we are able to bring in our co-innovation network, which is the ecosystem that Raja has been talking about, bringing the right partners. If it's your cloud partners, if it's your security partners, or if it's your technology underneath, what is that? And then we bring those together. Any innovations in that area, we have a delivery excellence group, that's the larger segment, and then the expertise, which is the whole level 4. If there are any issues that go beyond the level 2, level 3, then we have our own channels to help solve those issues as well. So bringing an overall ecosystem to help and accelerate the delivery of a new service model, and also a better delivery of the experience for the end user.
So there's some notable aspects that we've delivered, and the first thing I'll start off with, and I will shout out Geraint and the team did a fantastic job. From the point of tender, we were able to be at signature around about 3.5, 4 months. And I can't speak for the other universities represented here, but I understand for Warwick that was pretty pacey. And that process, which included going through consultation with our people, ensuring that they understood why we were doing what we were doing, the consultation with our academic community, our unions, etc., was phenomenal. And kudos to Geraint and the team, who did a fantastic job to get us to that point, so thank you. But what's been really, really good is we started the transition in January, and we're already seeing the green shoots of improvements. The transition has already improved service availability. One of the anecdotes I often share when I first joined, on why this was important, was on a particular day, which was my daughter's 4th birthday. I was amongst bouncy castles and princesses, and I received a LinkedIn message from our director of admin, a faculty director of admin, telling me that they couldn't print something out. And I thought, why not put a help desk? And it was then I realised that the help desk didn't provide that support out of ours. So actually, having that level of support is already addressing a lot of the escalations that typically come up to me, or I'm sure Geraint and the members of the leadership team. But already we're seeing, through testing, through our student population, a positive uptake on both in terms of utilisation but also their satisfaction in that survey. We're doing the process maturity assessment, and we've completed it, I should say, and that's helping us look at our processes, really getting us into the continuous improvement mindset on how do we have a end-user-centric process that is simple to transact and simple to get to a point of conclusion. SLA tracking and measurements. Well, I mean, one of the first questions I asked was, tell me what the service level agreements are, what measures have we got, how do we measure our KPIs? Well, we now have those, and they were brought up now into our governance structure for our Digital Ops Committee. Again, something that we didn't have over 2.5 years ago, and this has just accelerated that for us. As I've alluded to, we've enhanced our user experience. But it doesn't stop there, so we're looking to drive more automation, and 50% is the commercially contracted agreement that we have in place, and I'm glad this is being recorded so we know that. But 80% first call resolution, first contact resolution, I'm sure it's a metric we all know. But that's actually a really ambitious target we want to achieve. There's a lot of work that needs to go into doing that. You know, self-help, how we drive better knowledge-based articles, how we enhance users to help themselves rather than escalating things to me on LinkedIn as an example. But we expect there to be a productivity gain as a consequence of that. I don't need my leadership team, my directors focusing on day-to-day transactional stuff. I need them focusing on the big game-changing activities that are really going to shift the needle for us at Warwick. And we expect to see that through a leaner organisation. And I just want to talk on leaner organisation. I mean, we all know the sector is in difficulties from a financial perspective. Now, this hasn't all been about cash and efficiency and cash savings. A byproduct of this relationship is ensuring that we are delivering, I should say, a cheaper service by a pretty decent percentage of what it would have been to have created the same thing in-house. And again, allowing our leadership team to focus on those strategic imperatives that are going to help protect and grow the core of education and research.
I'll just take 1 minute to focus on the CSAT here, because I was in the session this morning which talked about celebrity service, and I was very bold to put my hand up saying that, you know, we are out of 1 to 10, we are at 9. And I wanted to say that quite confidently because this is what we measure ourselves, the customer satisfaction. And I'm quite, you know, this is one thing that we have measured every day in the environment, in the markets that we operate in. And we are number 1 in customer satisfaction for years now, tracking. And I thought that it reflects every time in the scorecard, and it's here.
So if I was, this is our last slide and then we'll open up to questions. If I was to describe the relationship with, in this case, TCS and our ambitions, I do genuinely believe that we are shifting the needle on the focus to be more enterprise level in our digital capabilities and our digital services. But I also believe that we are leveraging a start of several AI capabilities that's going to help us across those 5 goals. My final summary is that I don't believe we could inject the level of pace and the transformation that we've got and the ambition without a partnership approach. And I would encourage universities to look outside into the ecosystem and build those partnerships, whether they are service related or technology related, because you'll get the benefit of, and again, not preaching to the converted, I'm sure, but you'll get the benefit of disruptive thinking of other sectors that can be translated into AG. So I think...
Yeah, thank you, Raja. I think for that, you know, because whenever we are having these conversations with higher education institutes, the question that often comes is, but you know, you don't know HE, but that's the skill, you know, we have to do it collaboratively. And the reason why we were able to do it so fast with Warwick was because they were very open, they were very honest. They said, these are our issues, this is how we work. How do we work together? And the solution is crafted together. It cannot be done in isolation where we come and give you a shiny new kit. It will never work. So the partnership is one of the biggest elements in making something like this successful, however small, because these are just foundations. They grow pretty quickly into some of the most amazing programs that we've been able to deliver. I think that's us.
Yes, so for questions.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I'm Sean Green from Birkenbeck in London. I worked for quite a long time in local government, and I had a similar sort of partnership with an organisation, maybe half the IT team were part of networking, service desk, transformation with a third-party organisation. And what I found was, I mean, there was opportunities and flexibility with the resourcing, you can bring the resourcing in and out, technologies, but I found the issues were around managing the contract. So within my organisation I'm working, we didn't really have, you know, the same level of commercial acumen, you know, public sector organisation and contract management skills in the same way that our partner did. So sometimes I sort of had a sense that actually we weren't getting the best value out of this contract. Particularly, you know, everyone knows about the kind of baseline and the add-ons that keep coming in terms of the extra services that you have to keep paying for, and there isn't really any, sometimes there's some goodwill, most of it's based on the contract, obviously. It's a profit-making organisation. So I think I kind of buy into what you're saying, but I also think there's a big weakness unless we change the operating model to support that in terms of commercial contract skills. So I was interested, have you done that within your new operating model? Have you got
Yes.
good contract management within your team? Because I often found that when I was on the procurement team, they were not interested. Because they're about, compliance,
Yep.
new frameworks, all that sort of stuff. They weren't interested in managing the ongoing relationship.
Yeah, so it's probably, so the short answer is no, we haven't got procurement in our function. But I'll answer the question slightly differently. So there's three things. The first one is you need a strategic vendor framework, which is very different to a commodity supplier framework. And my experience, in private sector included, is if you treat a supplier like a supplier, you just get a transactional service. And what I've talked about today is actually you need to build a strategic partnership with the vendor, and it's a very different setup of a contract that you need. And to do that is define what the strategic vendor framework is, and that should be owned, I believe, by the digital function, and we've got that within my function. The second one is you need a commodity strategy, which you'd expect your procurement team to be doing. I've been asking for 2.5 years, and I'm still waiting. So I've created my own, and they're widely available on Gartner, etc. So what are the commodity services that you have within your digital function, and how do you commoditize it against the strategic framework? The third one is you need a vendor management office. That will and does sit in my function. So how do you manage your vendor, your business reviews, your monthly, quarterly, biannual business reviews with the partner of choice? And then your procurement team really are focusing on the fairness and the equality, given that we're a non-for-profit charity organisation. How do we ensure we remain fair and consistent? So what we have done, however, is in my senior leadership team and board meetings that I chair, I have a member of our head of procurement team as part of that leadership team. They're not sat on the side. I have all of my functional areas like finance, HR, procurement. They are part of that leadership construct, so they understand what we're trying to achieve, and they need to figure out how their processes can support. So in a very simple context, a matrix organisation. But what I would counsel is build your vendor management office, which again is quite commonplace in private sector, and your strategic vendor into your digital function.
Ben from UCL, looked at your benefits on your interest. I didn't see cashable benefits listed. Are you going after cashable benefits?
So there is cashable benefits. I didn't think it was appropriate to disclose them. But I'll give you a rough idea on percentage, about 15% against, but it's not a like-for-like service. So we, if I took our current service offering, I'm happy to have an offline coffee conversation with you what it looks like in pound signs, but it's in its millions over 5 years. But it's not a, say, direct correlation because we've invested in transformative capabilities, defence in depth in terms of SOC and threat intel, but it still saves us money over the five. What I should have said also, sorry, probably helps you give you the broader context is the team, my job title is I'm doing the PSG professional services transformation. So actually, part of the procurement answer in terms of how those processes work and the more broader benefits case are in the multi-millions over the 5 years of our target operating model.
And if I may just add, the kind of business cases that we are building with Warwick and with other universities, we see a minimum of 30-40% savings on the current business case that are there. So those are the minimum entry-level business cases that we are working on.
And these are contractually committed benefits. Just so
Yeah, on day one. Yeah.
Tell us a bit more about the AI work you do. You said it was a co-pilot. Tell us a bit more about
Yeah, so we've done several. We've done the Cognix workshops from a self-service, or we'll be deploying in May, June for end users. I think the date is, I'll look to the team to confirm. But the build-up to that work is building the knowledge base. On the AI side, there's kind of multiple aspects that we've looked at against the 5 goals. But I've looked upon it as a two-pronged approach. So yes, I have the strategic view and how do we drive AI initiatives across. But fundamentally on some of the co-pilot solutions, co-pilot agents is what we've used. We're working in partnership with Microsoft, so I had quite a lengthy conversation with Kate Maxwell, the Global Head of Education, on how we can leverage their expertise on supporting us with the low-hanging fruit on query management. We've used admissions as a start point. And working with admissions, what we did is looked at simple query management, so queries coming through. The average turnaround time for some of those queries, given they're coming in hundreds if not thousands, was around about 5 days. Those response rates are now within an hour, just a simple vet, and then that gets approved. But we've addressed 20% of those simple queries, and there's a roadmap to build to medium to complex. And in terms of how we're taking that further, we're doing the same with HR, procurement, and any of the professional services query aspects that are coming through. And we're expecting to run that through our AI COE that we've put in place. But what we're looking also to work with is some startups around chatbots for students, sentiment analysis, etc., which we'll share more about in a few months. Any questions? Oh, sorry. Did you want to ask me a question?
What was the hardest part of getting the, coming in from a private sector and looking at this? What did you find most challenging? Because the speed at which you've done this is quite pacey, I would say.
Yeah, but I give credit to my team for that in terms of pace. So I would say the challenging one is, so my role, I don't know if it's applicable in all universities, sits on the exec boards. And I felt that there was a lot of consultation I kept hearing that we had to do. And I've not operated enough in that space where I think should be accountable to make the decisions. So I think the accountability or lack of clarity on where accountability sits. Second one is we love governance in HE, don't we? As part of what we've done in the transformation is we've used rapid decision making on how we can empower people and pardon the expression, more lower down the organisation so people can make their decisions without concerns of being chastised, critiqued, etc. I think so. The governance would be my other one. The third is very inwardly focused. I don't know if again that would apply, but actually going out to the marketplace, seeing what does exist, I saw less of, and more inward focus on how we churn the ideas. I'm always a believer of this particular book. What got us here will not get us there, and it's worth a read, I think, because we are going to have to think about what other sectors have done, because the challenge we have today in HE is not dissimilar from what the banking sector had many, many years ago, retail had. I think I was sharing a very quick anecdote when I was in Dixon Stores Group, and I'll share this. I think it's quite pivotal, and I think the sector's in a similar place. There was a colleague in one of the stands, and I went into a boardroom to talk about the deployment of Windows 9, XP. I think that felt like so, going quite a while back. And it was a very old school boardroom. It was the days where you could smoke in the boardroom. It was full of smoke. And lovely characters is probably the best way I describe it. And I just caught the tail end of the marketing director said, we need to watch out for Amazon because they're starting to sell DVDs. And there was thunderous laughter in that room. This is Dixon Stores Group, and they had a footprint in the UK, if you remember that far back, in thousands of stores and a European expansion. And they were laughing. But it's going to happen. It's Amazon, they sell books. Need I say more? So I think we've got to look at the other sectors, and they're not directly comparable, like I said. But I think the education sector is so beautiful in terms of what it does and the value it brings and what it does for the world. But there are, how would I describe it, the sharks in the water that are looking around to see. And we're seeing the likes of global university systems, if you're familiar with them, and what they're doing in terms of acquisition to the universities. They're looking to see which ones are finding it difficult. It's how we start to look at where this partnership can grow and bring that thought leadership in.
And actually, I think this is the question probably for the room as well to think, what are the areas that we can, as a group, collaborate on, where, you're not losing any competitive advantage, but you're actually gaining efficiencies, you're gaining operational excellence, and you're able to cover the gaps of wherever, if it's funding, if it's the lack of fees that's coming in. What are those quick steps that we can take in a room full of decision makers, and how fast can we deliver that change? And I think SOC is a great example where people would have never gone shared service, but now that is the way to go because you get collective knowledge and push.
And if we, as we know, right, the government, they've kind of softly mandating that, aren't they, for the sector to look at shared services, and I think that's something that, again, we've seen shared services in private sector for decades, so this is something I think we need to bring that conversation to life in a more meaningful way, which is what services can be standardised, what can be shared across multiple universities, be that geographically or nationwide or European-wide. And there are some services your help desk should be standard, your HR administration, in my view, should be standard, not customised, and you focus your differentiation, which is your education and research offering. So for sure.
Perfect.
Oh, Hello.
Hello, nice to see you. One quick question. Given the financial challenges sector, as alluded to as part of the conversation, aside from working with suppliers, choosing suppliers over promise of financial savings and a long-term relationship, when it comes to selecting partners and suppliers, what would be the real key piece of advice you would offer at the universities for working with?
Well, I think you have to answer this because I would say just choose us. We are the best. But
You have to be the best, Jeremy. What would I choose? What do I tend to choose? I have worked in ecosystem outsourcing, worked with Capita. I mean, sorry, if anybody who worked there, I mean, if you work with Capita, then can we edit that bit out? I think the key thing I've always looked for is, I know I'm making a very obvious point, is the partnership that you bring. I don't need, or I've never liked working with a supplier. And I say that very deliberately. I don't want someone that's going to go, here's what I've delivered, here's my SLAs, OLAs, this is what I've done against this schedule, this is what that's not what I need. I need a partner that's going to come in and disrupt and challenge me and my. And I have had the pleasure of working with TCS at IAG. They're a sizable, really sizable account of British Airways, Iberia, etc. They're a sizable contract in Rolls-Royce. And therefore there was that established relationship, and I do take those relationships quite important. So that's my first thing, which is I need a partner that's going to bring in thought leadership as well as performance. The second one is they need to be able to scale. And I would counsel you need to look at any partner that can bring scale, enhancement of services, but their ability to scale into other domains. And thirdly, bring a level of gain sharing into that agreement as well. Right? The HE sector isn't like the private sector I accept. It doesn't have the cash availability to make those decisions. My discussions with TCS, and again I can't disclose the detail, talk more broadly about our digital ambitions. So actually, where I've got a digital strategy that's about 150 million over the 5 years, well actually how do I get partnerships that can offset some of that through them investing in my business and university. So they'll be the things I do. But the key one being partner, of which, Jeremy, you are, of course.
I think we've got to go back now. I think it's a bit-
Okay, no, well, thank you very much. Thank you.
thank you. Thank you.